Hello, all coaches, wherever you are in the world. We have a special session today on talent development, and we are doing it with a special guest star today. Next to Simon and Hervoje, we have Piotr Jurizierski. My apologies for the pronunciation of the Polish name, but I won't blame you if you pronounce my name, so that's no problem. Before I let Piotr introduce a little bit about himself, I would like to say that we'll cover shortly the element of talent identification, and after that we will go into the development of talent. And so let me just give the microphone and the image to Piotr to tell a little bit about himself, because you are in this group for this kind of occasion. You are new. And I think it's a good idea if you just introduce yourself a little bit, and then I will introduce the topic. And then, of course, it's open for discussion to you guys.
Okay, so thank you very much. It's not easy to say about myself because we learn to be modest people, but okay. So I've been coaching for 40 years. It's exactly 40 years since I earned my first money, and for the last 30 years I've been doing both jobs, like research on talent, mostly on talent ID, and I run talent ID program for Polish Tennis Association, and before it I used to do it for Canada and partly for UK. So this is my main job, that I'm trying to connect research and the practical part. What might be interesting for your participants is that the research I have been doing, I did on young players many years ago, and some of the players became very good players, like Roger Federer, and some were European champions, #1 in the world, just under 14, and that's it. And they didn't develop. So I think I got quite a wide experience in like not only searching for talents, but the way they develop or they didn't develop.
Right. Well, I think that's a good way to start. I would like to add that I also spotted talent in different countries, but of course most in Netherlands, as that's the country where I've been active most of my career. And one of the most frustrating things is that I found talent, and I was really very positive on their potential, and those are players you've never heard of. And that's also one of the things that we should include, like, what are the things we're looking for, or what are the things that really get our interest? And sometimes that's very personal. And my point of view is that in the whole world, everywhere there is talent identification, even within a family, people who know nothing about sports, but they see that their kid is talented. We see structured talent identification. We see in tennis schools, academies, clubs, and sometimes you have those people who have, the German word is Fingerspitzengefühl, where they just have like the only one who will see it, and all the other ones don't see it. And very often they're right, but even more often they're wrong. So there's structure and no structure. You see scientific approaches and non-scientific. So I think it's good to just zoom in a little bit on what we see and what have been the developments in this field.
Yeah, I think historically the majority of countries, especially big countries like Spain or Czech Republics, they have wide population of players, and then they just have some people who are maybe more talented, but they have good results at the young age, so they are selected to national teams, and then they are provided with better coaching, national centers, and so on. So it's based on a mass, many players. And at the same time, what I think was a huge difference, what Canada did, it's funny to say, but it's a small country in terms of tennis because of population, number of players, and the big distances. So they have to be very accurate, and they have to find talent like more with high probability. So it's a good story what we did with Debbie like 10 years ago, or even more than 10 years ago. We took all the players and we were doing tests. So it was a scientific approach, but in the end there was Bob Brett who was using his nose. So
Yeah.
what I mean, it's the composition of scientific approach, but together with such a knowledgeable coach like Bob was. So from my perspective, this is the good idea for our sport, because there are so many factors affecting performance in tennis that it's very difficult just to measure it with one test or even 20 tests.
Right. And Piotr, could you give an explanation about the difference between talent and being gifted?
Yeah, like in common meaning, talent is somebody who is extraordinary, but in fact, it's more like a potential for success. So it is possible that somebody is gifted. For example, we look how he plays, and his movements are smooth. And he always say, oh, his strokes are so nice, he's talented. But we don't know what is inside. If, for example, he can work hard, if he has internal motivation. Gifted means more than what we can see very easily, but talent is more like something which it is genetically or inborn, but it is a little bit hidden, so it is inside. So not everything what is seen means it doesn't cover everything.
Right. Would you say that the most coaches would actually look at the surface only, so the first things they can see, so that would be more gifted than talent?
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So I can give you one example from the history of Polish tennis. We have one guy whose strokes were like really like this, but he was working so hard, like 8 hours a day, so it's impossible like to understand it now. And after some years he became #1, and he was top 20 in the world for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But nobody thought he was talented, but in fact he was talented,
right?
Because he had features which were inside, which are not obvious from the first sight, right, from the first look.
Hervoje, I heard you react.
Piotr, it's great to have your introduction. I was, in my career as a coach, also very often asked by the parents, especially, about the talent of their players that have been practicing with me and how talented they are. And it's always a tricky question, as we all know. But what I learned from my experience, that it's much easier for me to say who will not succeed than who will be a potentially top player.
Exactly.
So that's actually perhaps something to turn actually a question around, because who will be next #1? Nobody can know. But actually, when I think about the players that I was practicing with, it was pretty easy to say who will not succeed when we talk, let's say, ATP top 100 or even higher level, where really the money is and what people are interested when they're asking about that being talented. What is your opinion about that?
Yeah, you are absolutely right. It is much easier to say that, okay, somebody has, let's say, weak coordination. So we know that he will not learn to play tennis properly. Yeah, so this is much easier. Then even with all scientific methods, tests, and knowledgeable coaches, we can increase the probability of identifying talent, but we never know for sure. So that's why, for example, what we do now in Poland, we try to collect all players who can hit twice over the net, provide them proper path, good coaching, and wait. Mm-hmm. Because we don't know if number 30 in Poland will not be #1 in the world in the future. Like Agnieszka Radwańska wasn't #1 in Poland under 12. Janowicz, who was top 20 in the world, wasn't in the top 10 in Poland. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So none of our except Świątek, none of our stars was even top 10 in the under 12. So for sure, results are not important at this age.
If I just come in on that's a good point, and I think a lot of the left-leaning, liberal type of holistic coaches will say, look, you don't have to be good young to be good when you're old, and that I fully understand, and the examples that you've provided then is evidence of that. But then, of course, there is also evidence that a lot of good players in the world were very good young. Andy Murray was he was final of Tarbes at 13. Rafa Nadal at 15 was already playing ITFs. Not ITFs. He was playing challenger events. Very, very young. So there were many good champions, and not just champions, but top 100 players that were also very good young. So what we're saying here is that both pathways can exist at the same time in uniform. You can be good young and be great old. You can be good young, fall away. You can be good young and just keep getting incrementally better until you reach your potential and get there. You could be a journeyman at 27, 28 and still getting into the top 100. That's possible, isn't it?
Yeah, of course, it is possible. In terms of statistics, there are more players who were not that good at the young age than champions. But the best example is Roger Federer, who was 100 in Europe under 14. But at the same time, Rafa Nadal was already very, very good, and the same Djokovic.
Yeah.
So it's not like 100. In fact, this is the beauty of our sport, that nobody knows what happens.
Piotr, perhaps you saw Federer when he was young playing, and was it not perhaps also related to the game style that he actually used that was very aggressive? I don't know how he played really. I didn't have a chance to see him at that time, because we know that at young age, like playing as a Nadal or Djokovic, bringing more balls back, it's easier to win.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what you say, because, I remember all these players when they were 12, 13. So, for example, Andy Murray was perfect already at the age of 12. He was not winning much, but his skills, everybody saw that he can play, that he played wise. Just the game style was like too old for his age. So he was not winning because, under 12 is enough to hit over the net. Yeah. The same with Federer. But what is interesting, when I did physical tests with them, and they were all at least average on or better in all physical tests. So physically, they were talented for sure.
If I can just...
The rest, like what you said, game style, it developed.
Okay, but what you said, actually, if you really aim for the top, you should not have any, like a major weakness in the, let's say, abilities and skills. Yeah.
Yes, that's a most important point. So, for example, when we test our players now, looking for future eventually champions, we look firstly if they have no gaps. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I had an example of my player who was even European champion under 14, but he was extremely slow from nature. Mm-hmm. So under 14, he was perfect. He was number one in the world. But then when he became pro, he was simply too slow, was not dynamic at all. So that was his gap. That's why he was only 700 ATP. So this is the classical example. Very, very good point for you.
So actually, we are now coming quickly to actually what is the main topic. It's a talent development, what is very important. And because spotting that somebody has these skills and abilities is great, but then what to do with them is a key for the coaches. Yeah. So Frank, do you have some questions for our friend?
Of course, I would like to challenge you with some statements. And one of the things I've seen a lot, all over the world, is people try to find talents, and as soon as they've got them, then they do exactly the same as with all the other players. And when you see that approach, I would like to say that coaches do it just to make their own lives easier, and or for their own ego, because the player who is either gifted or talented will learn faster and then just have results. So as a coach, I'm doing great because it's good for my ego. How would you react to that?
Absolutely, you are right. And that's why what many wise coaches do, even in the club situation, it's called regrouping. So they change groups all the time. If they see talented players, they put him, for example, to the better group, to older players, and they try to use different methods. This is the key point, in fact, because talent ID cannot exist without talent development. They are connected like a good marriage.
But Frank, actually, a question for you then, back from my side is, actually, are the coaches not really evaluated according to the results of their players? So that's the reason why they're looking for talented players, because you are considered to be a good coach if your players are winning.
Sure. So it's an ego thing.
To have talented players. Sorry.
Yeah. So it's an ego thing. I look better if I have players with results. So it's better for me to just have talents. Yesterday I went to a tournament here, an ITF junior tournament, grade 4, and there was a girl playing, 15 years old, and she beat the number 2 seed, and her coach said, this girl is not that talented. She's a very hard worker, and this is only her 3rd tournament in ITF juniors, and she loves to play, but it really takes a long time for her to get to this level, and she started relatively late. So it confirms the statement Piotr made that, you know, it's not all.
This is the talent for me.
But of course,
she has a talent.
And she likes it, and, you know, mentally very strong. She keeps fighting. She was 6-love, 4-1 down, and it became 4-all. She just missed one important shot because of a lack of experience, but she almost got to that girl, you know. So it's interesting to see there's so many different ways to develop players, and I think too often coaches just like the smooth movement and the natural biomechanically sound way of hitting, and then we are in love with the movement of that player, and we say, oh, this is a talent, we need to play. And as Piotr stated, we have to look at the other elements, like the passion, and the passion should come from inside also, and being stubborn, like believing I can do this, I keep going, and things like that.
I think just to add on to that, I think what Piotr has brought our awareness to this morning is the fact that talent was often used as a word to define a very narrow bandwidth of what our eyes see. And actually what the research has suggested is that we need to measure talent in a much more broader way. And it's not just the physical tests that we need to do, but we do need to measure their rallying, attacking, and defensive skills. We do need to measure their mental capacity, their mental aptitude, their passion for the game, their ability to work hard. There are a lot of determining factors which play out into maximizing your potential in the sport. And it's not just your smooth fluidity forehand like Roger Federer with pure muscle relaxation. There's a lot more to talent than just their forehands and backhands. I think that's essentially what we've now grown to understand about this whole divisive topic of, are they talented or are they not? Because that's how people use the word. They use it in an absolute sense. You either are or you're not. And what we're saying is that talent is across a spectrum which is very wide and across many layers. It's a multivariate spectrum, and therefore the axis that you have to consider is much wider than perhaps we'd like to see. And because it goes back to that original debate, doesn't it? Is it nature or nurture? I remember my previous performance director at the Lawn Tennis Association, Peter Keane, and he was director of UK Sport, a very smart guy, one of the smartest thinkers of sport I'd ever seen. He was actually the coach years ago, Chris Boardman, the Olympic cyclist. And he said, you know what, Simon, the thing with talent is that, you know, I have chickens in my house and I feed the chickens exactly the same. They live in exactly the same environment, but some chickens lay bigger eggs than other chickens. And I can't explain it. Some chickens, they grow up exactly the same way. Because that's the problem with talent ID. It's almost redundant as a topic because you can't test tube everyone in exactly the same way. There are so many factors into where you come from, where you live, how tall, how small, how physical, coordinated, when you started playing, when you didn't. There are so many different things that can be different. But if you look at chickens that were born on the same day, grown up in the same way, fed the same way, with the same parents, some chickens lay bigger eggs. And why is that? So it goes back to your point, Piotr, that is there a genetic predisposition to be athletic, to be coordinated, to focus, to work hard? And that I haven't got to the bottom of yet.
Yeah, you know, in my research, we did kind of the factor analysis. It's, you know, it's a lot of science. I don't fully understand how it was done because statistics is not my strongest point. But what interesting, what was in the end, from 100 something factors we measure, some were more close to genetics and some more to development, like the level of coaches, parents, money at home, things like this. So the result was like that these genetical factors are a little bit more important than, let's say, society, environment, but they were not decisive. And in the end, there were like 20%, nobody knows. So some people call it factor X, something which you cannot explain. So it's exactly like with your eggs. Yeah? Yeah. So we can measure many things, but not everything. And what I learned from all these years of research and working with top players and talented and not talented, that the role of coach. So in the end, there is a coach who can not only spot the talent, feed the talent, but he can feel it. So it's a kind of instinct based on knowledge, but in the end is that one. And that's what I learned from Bob Brett, because I still remember we have Denis Shapovalov, Felix Auger, and Bianca Andreescu, and there were 3 other guys which were on the same level. But he said, no, I feel Felix. Yeah? Yeah. And from research, we couldn't distinguish them, that one of them was better or not. But Bob was able to feel it.
And I always like those stories, and I admire the people who have this special gift of finding it. But the challenge is, we should be able to ask questions to those guys who have this specific good eye to find the talented guys. Like, what is it you see? Because if it's only like a feeling and they cannot explain, we can never use the principles, you know. So
exactly.
Actually think about what they see, what they're looking at, and teach us. For example, like the eyes of a player. Most coaches don't look at eyes, and I think the eyes are so important. Like, how do they spot the ball, see the opponents, and find solutions? And so the perception element is not very often tested. And I would really like to emphasize the experienced coaches to explain how they find this specific element that they fall for, that they say, oh yeah, this is the one I want to put my energy in.
Yeah, because you are absolutely right. You are absolutely right in this. Because, but also Bob, and even now when we are working with some young ones, we can explain, okay, maybe his technique is not fluent, but his eyes, he can focus. He knows how to win. He makes proper tactical decisions. How can you measure tactical decisions? It's impossible to measure. It's eye of the coach.
Right.
Yeah? So, but we can explain why.
Okay. Shall we go to the next statement, next principle?
Sure.
Yeah. When you think of player development handbooks, some countries have good handbooks to develop a player. Some have kind of recipes that they use for everyone. And when I thought of the famous stories of Brazilian football players who are normally technically very good, and how they learned it, it was on the beach and there was no coach and they just were self-taught. Think of Einstein, who was not that good in math, in mathematics. And well, he appeared to be quite brilliant. And there are many examples of people also in music who did not get a, let's say, fixed program, but became excellent specialists in their field that they apparently had the talent for. So one of the things that I've seen is that a lot of coaches use the same path they use for recreational players to develop talents, and the only thing that changes is they go faster and they will move them to another group, but they keep doing the same principles or keep doing the same exercises, give the same corrections as the not talented players. Do you agree that you see that also in other countries?
Yes, less experienced coaches do this. Yeah, so they follow the same path for everyone. But when I observe really talented coaches, one of them is sitting close to me at the moment. She has 10 different players, but with the most talented one, she does something different. Because he has different needs.
Right.
So
can I ask you, what is this different? That would be interesting. What is concretely this difference?
So, okay, we use, of course, game-based approach, open, close, open. We analyze players all the time, and we are looking for, okay, he is at least, because he's talented, so he is average in all skills. But there are, for example, the fluency of muscles, like he doesn't have movements which are that fluent as all others, but he can still beat them. So if we analyze him and we see there are some little problems which can slow down his career, we focus on this. But at the same moment, we look also for his future game style. We have a vision how he can play in the future. And I had the same with Martina. You remember probably my player who is in the Fed Cup team now. Theoretically, I wrote the book that you should practice 4 times a week, 2 hours. And then I was practicing with her much more. But what I was doing, she is now 185 centimeters, so very tall. I was doing much more coordination with her. Yeah? And it's not in books. And her sister was with another coach, working with the same methods like everybody, and she didn't develop at all. She was not even average player. Yeah? So individual approach for talents, it's a necessity.
I like this example because it means that you adapt to the player. You look for what they need, where they could go and maybe should go. The disadvantage of where they should go, because of our experience, we can anticipate on where they could go. And then if you make it, you should go there, we could limit the player to really exploit all the talents he or she has. So that's where you have like the adaptation that you can find because of your experience, as opposed to the standard approach to development handbooks or in development handbooks, and that they will do with all the players, the number of hours, the content of it. So that's where I think coaches should be more aware of being able to adapt to the needs of the player. I like that statement that you made there.
Yeah.
Frank, just one thing I would like to back up a little bit, because the premise of this question began with the Brazilian football example. And I think if I dig to the bottom of your point, what you were trying to say is a lot of people learn through play, through organic, implicit environments. It's not so robotically taught, which of course is true and untrue, but it would be a disservice to say to the Brazilian Football Association that all their footballers are developed by playing with no shoes in shanty towns on the edge of Sao Paulo, because let's be very clear, those kids that are in those slums in the streets, they're quickly identified and they are filtered in to great academies within the Brazilian cities, and they are given a lot of money, a lot of opportunities. And so it's not just that they develop those technical skills organically and implicitly. I think it is trained, it is developed, and the role of the coach is still to accelerate the learning curve. And that's why we will always need coaches in sport and teachers, because no matter how much internet you have, you need someone there, shoulder to shoulder, helping you to develop whatever talent you have.
Oh, absolutely. I agree on that. So one of the questions is, like, what is it that we really need to teach them? And what are the things we will let them develop themselves? Because the real unique talents, they will have different solutions. And as you know, I like to think theoretically about what we see and how we can explain it and how we can teach it. But we should realize that in tennis, this is different than with Einstein. In his field, the theory goes ahead of the practical proof. But in tennis, the players show the way and we try to explain it. So we always have to look at those new and unique solutions and the options the player shows and then guide them to make it more effective. Would you agree?
You are right with the word guide them, not like order them, but guide them.
Right.
And this is also a secret of great coaches.
I have one question for you that is coming to my mind after you have talked about this player that you developed, the tall one, yeah, and you worked on coordination with her. And actually is related to this, how much to put an emphasis in coaching on the weaknesses versus strengths. Because why I'm asking you this, Piotr, because I saw also in my career that I would say majority of the coaches are focusing most of the time on weaknesses. What do you think about now this, from your also experience and research, how much really to focus on weaknesses, how much really to be in charge of the strengths from a young age, and how to combine it together when we talk about talented players?
Yeah, this is excellent point, because I wouldn't say that it's wrong to work on weaknesses, because, for example, if you are slow, it will be like a break for your career, or if you have no volley. Yeah, so you have to be at least average in everything, but then you cannot be just average. So you have to develop your strengths. And I still remember we had discussion about this, like it was maybe 30 years ago in Norwich. Frank remembers with Richard Schoenborn, and he said, we were talking about Steffi Graf. You remember her obvious problem was her backhand was not that good. And what was she practicing most? Forehand. So she was working more on strengths than on weaknesses. So of course, at the young age, you have to develop versatile player, all-round player. But then you have to specialize from one moment. And one more example comes to my mind. I was watching maybe 2 or 3 years ago, John Isner on clay, very tall guy, and he was in the quarterfinal of Roland Garros on clay. You think that tall guy who is just serving is not good enough to play on clay, but he mastered his strengths to the maximum. So his serve was great, but also his return was great. So he didn't allow opponents to play long rallies. So serve, forehand, return, forehand, waiting for one break. Yeah. And that's how he was winning on clay. So he was not trying to run better. Yeah? So he was working, I suppose he was working on his strengths.
I guess the question there is that in the future, and we don't know in the future, we can only guess, I guess, is will weaknesses be allowed in the modern game at the highest level? And that's an interesting question, because you're right, you can compensate in tennis by having a better serve if you don't move that well. You can compensate in tennis if your backhand, you can't. Greg Rudetsky was the same, right? Serve, volley, everything, chip charge, everything. He had no ground strokes, no backhand topspin. So, but he didn't need them. He got to 4th in the world, run up to the US Open, because he served and volleyed and had amazing serve and amazing volleys at midcourt and near the net. So you can compensate historically. Now, the question is, can you compensate in the future? Because the game is getting so physical, people will hurt your weaknesses, and therefore the message for the coach is to actually, no, you do need an all-round game where everything is even yes. better than average, Piotr, maybe better than average, because yes. a lot of people can be average, very few people can be great, right?
Yeah, well, for example, with players which we are working on, okay, the word average is, let's say, it's not enough. Like in James Bond, the word is not enough.
Well, it's not
so
enough.
They cannot have any gaps for sure. So like they must play everything. They must feel all around the game. Yeah. So before puberty, even now when they still, one of the group is still under 10, so they play with green ball, but they can play hot dogs, slam dunks, stop volleys. They can play everything at the age of 10. And based on this, we are looking, okay, he will be tall. He runs better. So maybe he will play more from the baseline. So we are looking for future game style, but we are still not specializing too early. Yeah. So from one point, okay, you need your strengths, but I believe, I smell the future that you must be really good in everything. And if you look at, for example, Rafa Nadal is a classical example. He's much more all-rounder than before. If we look at his statistics, they are very close to Roger Federer's statistics. Yeah. So he developed. He always says that I'm still learning new things.
Yeah.
Even at this age.
I would like to add something on the working on the strong points or the weak points. So it's in let's say additional to what Piotr just said. At a young age, you should confront them with all kinds of things that they need in the game. So that can be done in of course, the tennis kids, courts, different colors, and you have to do everything. Later on, you will specialize, and when you are in a specialization phase, no one will become more confident by working on the weak spots. So you should also relate it to periodization, where next week is a big tournament, then work on the strength and work on confidence, make them sure they can hurt an opponent. If you would be working mostly on the things you're not good at, you won't have that confidence to actually have a good result. But when you have, after an injury and you need to build up, or there's a tournament only in 3 or 4 months from now, that gives you more time to also kind of compensate on those weaker points. Second principle, there's a difference for me between a missing shot, so something that doesn't make you the complete player, and something you're vulnerable at. So the fact that, for example, Rafa Nadal did not play a slice approach shot most of his career is not something that players could actually use, because they could not beat him because of that shot, let's say, missing. And so a shot missing, if the opponent cannot use it to beat you, is a different thing than something the opponent can exploit to beat you, because then it hurts you. So that's also different. And especially coaches who think from a kind of idealistic model, like my player should be able to do everything, and then working on those things that are missing, but doesn't make them vulnerable, they're really spoiling time, I think.
I always like the expression, attention to the big picture before attention to detail. That specific detail of slice approach shot, come in on the backhand with side spin, that's a very niche pattern of play, which very few players would probably play, in reality, to the amount of people that are playing the game. But what Rafa can do is grind all day. He can attack with the forehand. He can run around his backhand. He can first serve, second serve, kick. The big rocks are there first before he worries about all those little niche drop shot from inside the base, outside the baseline, etc. Frank, can I just come back to your question a minute ago, but then actually ask Piotr the question? You talked about, and a great question, well, talent, some kids are talented, some kids are not, or all kids have different skills, and our job of the coach is to maximize those skills so they flourish their potential in the game. That's a narrative I really believe in. I don't like to label someone talented or not talented, but I recognize that they have something special and we should maximize that. Now, very specific question. You said, what could we teach versus what should they learn organically? Where does that line in the sand go? So here's a practical example that we've all experienced: the chopper grip, the teaching of the chopper grip for the technique on the serve. Now, some 7-8-year-old kids, you turn the grip and they just throw the racket and it looks like a professional serve at 8 years of age. And you go, wow, that kid is so gifted, so talented, so skillful, so cool. They learn fast. Whatever label you want to give that kid, that you ask them to do something, and it's quite, they have a forehand grip, then you just say change the grip, and it's brilliant. But then some kids, you change the grip and they change the grip back round. The elbow goes high. They bowl the serve. It doesn't work. And I wanted to know, why do you think that is, Piotr? Why do you think some children can quickly learn these technical skills that then maybe results in the coach labeling them as talented, or that they learn fast?
You know, learning fast is an important skill. And I remember Richard Sherman was talking about this already 30 or 40 years ago. So for sure, it's one of the signs of talent. That's sure. But there are also people who learn fast, but they forget fast. Oh. And some people learn slower, but it's more solid. So again, one of our players comes to our mind. It was really when we got him with the Western grip. It wasn't easy to improve the grip, but once it was done, his forehand became perfect. But it took a long time. But I also had players who were like learning very fast. They went to tournament, and after tournament they were like this.
Right.
So we had to teach them again. So it's not easy answer. It's very individual.
But that, and again, going back to I'll push you on that point, that the boy that's 7 years of age that just picks up a racket and can serve top of grip, is that athletics? Is that coordination? Is that just
I think
genetics?
It looks like it is coordination. Of course, it's a theoretical question because we didn't see this boy.
Right.
But it looks like he's gifted. That's the point. He's gifted because he learns quickly. Then if he can use the serve tactically, that's the next point.
Right.
Because there are many people who are very fluent technically, but tactically they are awful.
Yeah.
And we remember Brad Gilbert, awful player with great tactics.
Yes.
But now I will be tough to you, Piotr, because you said it's coordination, but you're a scientist, and I know there are different factors of coordination. So what would be really specifically related to this learning skill? Let's say like this, the kids that are really learning, is it a rhythm? Is it a balance? You know what I mean with this? There can be different ways in which you can determine which element of coordination is then really responsible, because this, I think, is actually Simon question that he would also like to hear about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Very difficult to answer. Very difficult. If you know, there are like in sports science, there are six factors of coordination. Very difficult because you can have good balance, but the feeling, like the touch, the feeling, kinesthetic feeling, cannot be perfect. Yeah, so it's such a multi-factor sport that I think, honestly, I cannot answer this. Yeah. There is not like receipt because it's so many combinations. I know you know it, Florian.
No, I know, but I also wanted to take this opportunity to learn again. So, from my experience, when I was looking at the players that were learning fast, I would say they have this kinesthetic sense for their body. They felt their movements, especially if something is not in front of your eyes. So that's I would say this one. And the second very important thing, especially by the young kids, young kids from 6 to 10, is how you call it? Help me, Simon. Is when you are tense. So it's a muscle tension. So feeling for there is another expression in English, I'm sure. Looseness. It's about looseness.
Loose fluidity.
How actually does the player feel their own muscle tension? The ones that are tensed and doesn't feel that, they are so difficult to be getting
we have a player who has exceptional feeling. That touch is amazing, but he's so tense. So everything which is up, so his serve, smashes are not that good as regular forehands and backhands. And it's so difficult to improve because we know that he must improve this. It is his gap. It's like really he plays like this, and it's sometimes like 30% of practice. We work on this
to relax,
and the progress is, let's say, at the moment still very, very limited.
So the two elements.
He's number one in his age group in Poland, but we know that it's something what he's missing. But important, from this experience that his touch, so one of the factors connected to coordination is perfect, another one is very weak. So it's not like that you are talented in everything.
Of course.
What I would like to add is that the two elements within coordination that we are talking about here is, one point is differentiation within the body movement. So to be able to differentiate, to kind of unlock one body part from the other one, so that you can have different variations there. And the other element is the element of adaptation. So the adaptation means that it's not a standard movement, but you can actually find solutions again. And again, what I've seen a lot is with, let's say, excellent coaches and excellent physical coaches who more have this philosophy of repeating the same thing all the time to become better, which is a totally different element than working on that adaptation element and the differentiation element.
Yeah, Fourier, thanks to you, you remember Professor Schoenhall.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I think just as a summary to this
Differentiation
point around
concept.
learning is that it really fascinates me, that question, Frank, around, you know, what should we have to teach versus what should they learn? And a friend of mine said this to me once, and it always stuck with me as a really poignant point, that if you have to teach the players a lot of skills, then maybe they're not that good. Like, they should have some things naturally. They should be exposed. Don't get me wrong. How they're exposed to those learning of skills is another debate. Like, if they do a lot of play, a lot of Kenneth Bastians would be a massive advocate of multi-skills at a young age, exposure to lots of sports, a lot of deliberate play, where you develop an athletic child before you worry about teaching them advanced strokes. And I think we'd all probably be fans of that narrative as well. But if you're always having to change the technique and improve technique every lesson, with every play, on every skill, on every stroke, and they don't bring anything naturally to the table, then I think it's going to be a difficult route for that player to maybe make it to the top ends of the game. And again, that's probably controversial, because the left-leaning purist people believe that anyone can make it if they want to. Anyone can make it.
It's not controversial. It's true. It's
Exactly.
true.
It's true. Yeah.
So let's take it to a next thing in related to your statement, Simon, is that talented people are, on average, or should be, authentic, because you will see unique solutions that people can only admire, and that's when they say, wow, this guy or girl is so talented. Now, different to letting this talent coming out is where you mold people into a certain personally preferred or scientifically proved model. Like, I know from science, or I know because I'm a good coach, how you should move. And that means, this is related to your previous remark, that if I try to put something in based on my experience and my knowledge, maybe it's not allowing you to actually show what you have in you. And so there are 4 points that I've found that are related to developing talents. And there are four questions, actually. Who are you? And this has to do with your mind, your character, etc. Then what are you capable of? What are the skills you have now? Then where do you want to go is number 3. That means you have to develop other skills or better skills. And the 4th one is, how much space do you take or do you get to exploit your talent? And this is what we should, and that's why it's related to your remark. If we only keep them like harnessed in our approach, in our model, in what we want to do, they can never exploit their unique talent. So they need some freedom. And it depends on your style of coaching, whether you give them the possibility to do that.
Interesting.
What do you think about that, guys?
Yeah, tennis is a sport of freedom, in fact. Yeah, it's a sport of individual characters. You mentioned ego. Huh? It's part of the talent, in fact.
Mhm.
that you have your individuality, your individual style, your individual way of playing, of fighting, and coming from looking at other, let's say, in arts. If you look at Picasso, people they were special. They were different from others. Maybe it's not so visible in tennis, but it exists that these people are unique. They are different from others. And this is
Sure.
also a definition of talent. They are different from others. You are not average. You know, even this strange behavior of Rafa Nadal with bottles and all these things. Yeah, it's a part of his individuality.
Absolutely. Think of music also. You see it in jazz music, guys who go to places where no one has been before, you know, in the musical sense. And in sports, in football, you see those solutions. And so it's interesting. So do you guys agree on the fact that we should acknowledge or respect the authenticity of a talented player?
Frank,
Would you agree on that?
I agree with you 100%. But for all three of you, I have one question. And that is because actually, what is the authenticity by the young players when we are identifying the talents? And actually, how to decide what to let them do in their own way and what to change? Like changing double-handed forehands by Monica Seles or some other top players would be obviously totally wrong. But changing from double-handed backhands, if I remember well, by Sampras, by Edbergs were great decisions. Now, I will give my own, let's say, part of the answer, and then would like to hear your opinions, obviously. One thing, of course, is effectiveness. If player is effective, if he makes points with something what is special. Second, when you talk about technique, it should be biomechanically sound that it doesn't lead to injury. That's obviously very important. If it leads to injury in 2 years, we have to step in because that will not lead him to fulfill his potentials. But also one thing is what I would call stubbornness. Because authentic people and really talented people are usually very stubborn and they stay behind. So I would, let's say, what I tried, I was testing these young players, how much they stay behind that when I was trying even to prevent or forbid something. And then actually you can see if it's really part of their, let's call it, personality. So what are your thoughts about it? Because for me, that was always a question, what to allow or what to, let's call it, correct, guide.
For me, Frank, one of the things that what you're talking about authenticity is being your true self. And you know, I think Andy Murray is someone that exudes that. He's someone that I really believe brought that side spin drop shot back into the game. You know, not many players were really doing it that often. As a young kid, he loved hitting drop shots all day long. It would have been wrong for the coach to say, okay, stop that. That's tactically wrong. No, you're playing too many drop shots. You're bailing too early in the rally. That would be an example, a practical example of the coach preventing the players' authentic, innovative, creative adaptations to strokes and skills. Another example, a more modern example, Denis Shapovalov. He's really brought the single-handed backhand jump into the game again, because Gasquet didn't do that. Sampras didn't do that. Not on a single-hander on the backhand side. Forehand, they jump a bit more, but very few players will jump on the one-handed backhand, and he does it quite regularly. So that's another example of where the coach, if the coach would have said to him, no, don't do that. Stay on the ground, be stable, be balanced. That would have reduced his creative juices of playing around with the backhand in training. So I'm sure that these kids they copy each other's serves, they copy the pros, they play like the women, the men play like the men play like the women. I'm sure Ash Barty was, you know, the way she plays, her skillfulness of slices and drop shots would have been playing with the boys, playing with their male coach, practicing the slice on the grass. So we have to make sure that we just don't limit the player's ability to, in England, we say muck around. You muck around, you have fun, you just, there's no rules, no, just muck around. It's free play, sparring. And if we can do that with our young players and not be so strict with what they should do with their strokes, but to be creative in adapting when attacking and defending. I think that's what we really look. Rallying is rallying, right? Everyone rallies the same. normal strokes, good technique, they rally. When you attack, people do it different. You know, Nadal like this and Djokovic like this, Murray like this. You know, they'll adapt a little bit their swings on their when they're attacking and defending. It's that where their authentic creative game is developed. You see different things when they're in defense. Like Rafa Nadal will run around his backhand on the run. Most people, when they run around the backhand, they stay still. So they run around the backhand, stop, and then hit inside out forehand. Nadal will run around the backhand and still be moving as he hits. Very few players do that at the highest level of the game. So that's what I mean by creative, authentic adaptation within the game. I think we should encourage that as much as possible.
I like that. And in answering the question by Hrvoje, I would say there are different approaches from coaches. Like the more traditional ones would teach movements. Yeah. And when I would kind of filter out what Simon just said, and I fully agree with that, is you teach skills and not movements. And it is about the quality of the skill, which means that as long as Shapovalov is jumping and hitting that single-handed backhand, and the shot is heavy enough, has enough quality so that the opponent cannot attack him from there, it's fine. And sometimes you see that even when the result is great, some coaches would still correct it because they don't like it. It is too dangerous to do it like that because the timing is difficult and jumping is, you need static balance and like feet on the ground and things. So all kind of principles are kind of abused to be right as a coach and to change the player. So in authenticity, it is important for me that you keep looking for unique solutions, give them the freedom. And I would like to refer to a statement by, well, a pretty clever guy, Albert Einstein. They still confirm things that he found out. He died in 1955, so 66 years ago, and he still has principles that they say, wow, it was good after all. You know, they disagreed with him, but actually it was good. Now, what he said is it's the supreme art of the teacher to awaken joy in creative expression. And of course, he was more in the theoretical field, but I like that principle. When you challenge the player, when you enjoy seeing them find solutions, you can really stay close to this authenticity. And of course, next to that, linked to Hrvoje's question, you need to teach them a lot of different skills, but not with a kind of limiting approach to how it should be done, because that kills the creative side of those unique talents. That's my feeling. My strong feeling is that. Would you guys agree on that?
Yeah, absolutely.
$1,000,000%.
Great summary.
Something to hear from you, Piotr, on this topic for me, and then we can move on.
What you were talking, it reminded me our friend Bruce Elliott with the term of range of acceptability. That okay, there is a core, biomechanical principles, but in the end, Rafa Nadal does it a little bit different way, but still, let's say, a healthy way. Yeah. At the same in coaching, there are some standards, but in the end, it is what we call art of coaching. But this art is not based on totally like something abstractable. I don't know, but it's based on science. So you have knowledge, but in the end, you can adopt. At the same, talented player has basic skills. He hits in front with proper grip, etc., etc. But in the end, Dennis or Rafa or somebody else can do it a little bit different, but it's still within, let's say, range of acceptability. Let's say like this.
Good point, Piotr. Because what those? I mean, look, how many coaches would you know would have changed Goran Ivanisevic's start position on his serve? You know, he always had that funny little
a little bit open, a little bit semi-open stance.
Yeah. I mean, there would be many coaches that would, in Great Britain alone, that would be go, well, that doesn't meet my ideal model of what it should look like. Therefore, we need to change the model, start more conventionally, you know, feet towards the net post, racket and ball together. But we have to be careful changing the idiosyncratic individualization of of the things that don't matter actually sometimes as well. The way they walk.
But biomechanically, his serve was very good.
Was amazing. I mean,
it's a matter. It's also a matter of knowledge of the coach, not like my own model, which is probably, let's say, too narrow.
Yeah, their knowledge is based around the stylistic features versus the biomechanical fundamentals.
But guys, actually, this also discussion leads me to one other question. Does actually we don't need also authentic coaches to develop authentic players? We talk about coach education a little bit before in our previous conversations, but I reflect on that. And do we really then prepare? And also Piotr is coach educator. So do we really then develop the right coaches if we want to have authentic players? Should we also give more authenticity to the coaches, what it means? Not in script, but the question.
At the moment, I have to say big thank you to you, because our discussions like 7-8 years ago, it led to our. You were the real author of our coaches education system and the way we are approaching the coaches. So the way we stop this we call it Bismarck German systematic method of coaches, like theory, and then practice. What I do first at the moment, we have e-learning, but then we take coaches to our training camps and we learn from experience, and then we add more theory. So it's a little bit open, close, open all the time. Yeah, practice, theory, practice, but we start from a lot from case studies. Okay, we have this little Goran. What would you do? Don't change because biomechanically it might be okay.
Maybe you guys can remember in one of my presentations many years ago, I used a very funny clip that is by two comedians from Great Britain, and it is with the football coach. And there's the assistant, or the apprentice, and whatever the coach is doing, he's just copying it. Has no idea what he's doing, but he's copying it, and it's hilarious. It's really a funny stage scene. Of course, it's a sketch, but I've used that a lot to also show, and this confirms what Hrvoje just stated. You need to be authentic yourself. You need to be coaching from your heart. You cannot use the philosophy from another person to be successful. You cannot copy the unique guy like Nick Bollettieri, who is obviously the guy who had most successful players in whatever way he did it. You cannot copy that. It's impossible. You can learn from it. And I think that being authentic as a coach is important, but we should also be adaptive to those real talents. And so that comes back to this starting this topic, is that we need to really be able to look at the player we're working with and make sure that their development is not hindered by us, but that we actually accelerate their learning process.
Frank, I just found your video. If you wish that we share this video with the audience, Frank, what do you think?
I think it would be really funny.
Okay, really... I will share it. So let's just leave it for the audience to see. This was one of your great contributions to the European and Worldwide Coaches Conferences. So I hope you see it now. Yeah.
Yeah.
This assistant can tell.
Steven! Move back! Move back! Got it! Number two! Come on, Johnny! Number two! Come here, Charlie! I'm waiting for God's sake! Come here! Come on!
I will stop it here. I believe it's enough for sharing the idea, yeah? And we can move on, yeah?
You are incredible that you found it so quickly. And the funny thing is, especially when the coach is changing a player, he just grabs a player. It happens to be the goalkeeper, and he just wants to change that guy also. So this is like someone who is copying and has no clue what he's doing. And I always challenge coaches in my coaches education to become their own personality as a coach, and they should make sure they're effective with players they work with. You cannot copy the successful coach by just pretending to be him. So that's an essential element for me.
Frank, just on that, if I may challenge that slightly, if that's okay, just to be provocative, because
Sure.
I don't disagree with you at all. I don't subscribe to it exactly the same, because we have a saying in the UK that you become the sum of the 10 people you spend the most time with.
Sure.
And it's like, you know, I am a little bit my mum, and I'm a little bit my dad, and I'm a little bit my partner, and I'm a little bit Louis, because I spent 14 years shoulder to shoulder with Louis Kerr at the LTA. And if anybody watches me present, watches me coach, there will be bits of what I say, a lot of what I say and do, that you could say, well, I could see Louis doing that. But of course, that is the evolution of life. You do become what your environment is shaped you to be like. And you know, you'll start saying things that your parents used to say to you. You can't help it. It's because mimicry is the first stage of learning. It's what young children do when they play cops and robbers, or I'll be mummy, you be daddy, or I'll be nurse, you be doctor. That they take on the imaginative roles of people they know or know little bits of. And I think that sometimes you have to catch up before you can overtake. Sometimes you have to catch up before you can overtake. And that's really important. It's not like, oh, we need to find a completely innovative new way of developing players. It's like, no, there have been good coaches that have developed good players in the past, and what they did worked. So how did it work? Well, they did the basics well. They played tournaments. They taught us techniques. They taught them tactically. They played tournaments. Do that before you worry about some magical, innovative, new, creative way of because you could be wasting a lot of time doing that. So catch up before you overtake. Now, mimicry and learning is a bit like that. It's like, well, let's learn to be a bit like other people. And then as we do that, and lots of people, because the more exposure to lots of people you have, the more chances are that you'll learn different approaches to developing players as a coach yourself. And therefore, as you get older and more experienced, you start to select and choose the best bits of all the things you hear. And that becomes your individual self, your authentic self. So,
Absolutely.
so mimicry and copying, I think, is a very useful, not to the level that the clip is showing, of course.
No.
It's copying every gesture, every body language, everything. But
Right. I fully agree. It's just as you said. We know from this Italian researcher who found out that babies, quite short after they're born, start mimicking, and so there's this mirror neuron that actually is active from the earliest stage in your life. So it's essential. But what I'm saying is, don't try to copy, try to learn. And what you will do, you don't use all the elements your parents did to you, because there are some that you really disliked, and you will just erase them from your system. So take the good things, but make it personal, make it yours, so that you can be authentic in your approach as a coach. That is actually what I want to get across, which is important. Think of comedians who are really funny in the theater. When you try to copy it, it will probably not be half as funny when you try to copy it, because it's much more than just the words. It's a combination of a lot of factors.
Yeah, exactly.
So we actually are ending up now, Frank, after over 1 hour of conversation.
Yeah, I like to add one more thing in the development of players. That would be that a lot of coaches find it extremely important to be consistent and to use percentage play. And of course, I do acknowledge the importance of having trustworthy shots. But when you overemphasize the element of consistency, not making mistakes, I am so much afraid we will kill the curiosity of the player, and to try and find new solutions, but also to be able to move borders, because fear is not a good way to really go further. You need to be brave without being stupid. So I would like to hear a bit from you guys about this extreme consistency exercises and let's say the overemphasis of percentage play.
I think there are two issues. First, what you said about characteristic of the game. If like 4 or 6 shots are finished with it's the whole rally lasts 4 or 5 shots on average, like 73% or something. Yeah. So
Yeah.
hitting 50 cross courts, it's not the most important exercise in tennis. So also using more open exercises instead of only closed drills. It's, for me, it's so obvious, and what we have been doing for years. So sometimes maybe we need closed drills, but at the moment the ability of improvisation is maybe the most important skill of great players.
Yeah.
So you can, okay, you have your let's say standard behavior, like you play like Roger Federer 2 times inside out and then inside in, but in the end you can also improvise and play a shot you never used it before, you never practiced. And it's a mixture of coordination and mind. And what you say, I like what you said about being brave but not being crazy.
Yeah.
Or being stupid. Yeah. This is like exact balance. Is something what we should work with every talented player. It might be difficult for players which are not very talented. Yeah. But in our coaches education, we try to teach coaches how to create players who are able to play with instinct. Yeah. If you ask top players why did you play this kind of shot during the match point, they also always answer, was it wrong? No, I did right. But why? I don't know. Yeah? It's instinct. Yeah? It's different kind of intelligence.
Okay, can I add something here?
Sure.
I will put just one statement in front of you guys. In order to have variation, you should have pattern first. Otherwise, it's random hitting. So what I mean with this is, and you see it by young players that are making a lot of unforced errors. They're just hitting without any system in a point. So when I would like to answer your question, and in my philosophy of developing young players, I would emphasize high percentage first, in order to make them also aware what is comfortable, consistent for them, demanding for the opponent. And then later, actually, I would emphasize more variation, especially when they will be aware about the patterns. Now, we can start to work on patterns from the age of 13. So, and also here, one important thing for me, it's, and I learned it from you, Frank, it's very important to be aware about the personality type. There are the personalities, players also at the young age that will show you that they tend to go for more risk, or they can accept more risky solutions than the others. So obviously here we have to be individual again, but still I'm coming back to my first statement. The variation you can build up on the patterns, otherwise it's a random hitting. So, okay.
Yeah, I would agree on about 90% of what you say there, because I would certainly urge to develop trustworthy shots. And that means that you kind of know where the ball is going and the ball is, well, going in and has some quality. I'm a little bit afraid of patterns, even though I do acknowledge the preferred patterns players have, but patterns can also be a limiting thing, especially limiting when players see more than other players. So they see that the court is not covered and they find a solution to do that. And a pattern could then be limiting, although of course I will acknowledge the fact that it can be in junior tennis very effective to play a certain pattern. Don't take too much risk because all the kids will make mistakes and you will win a lot. But again, back to the topic of the talent, I wouldn't limit them within the certain pattern, but they need to develop trustworthy shots. Also the shots that I, as let's say a safe thinking coach, would never do that. And my coach would have killed me if I did that. So that's what I teach, is a different approach than allowing my player to explore the safety of his shots or the adventurous shots that he would like to do, and make him aware of that, so that he should reflect on that and learn from it.
Frank, can I give my just quick response to your question, because you pitched it around, you know, a lot of coaches do these high rally threshold drills, don't miss, be consistent, and that course is based around that of course is based around the fear that you talked about, and I actually don't believe that is based around fear coaching. I believe that actually provides the opposite solution, and the opposite solution is one that, well, the opposite belief that it develops is that I will out rally my opponent. I won't miss. I'm solid. I play high percentage. So doing those, okay, rally to 50 shots past the service line, no mistakes, guys. You know, that could lead to playing safe and guiding the ball and not hitting freely, of course. But it could also lead to someone that really believes that they'll never miss. They'll always out rally their opponent. And that there's obviously some, you know, the Spaniards, South Americans that play on the slow surfaces would be massive advocates of that type of approach to developing consistent grind strokes from the baseline. But there's a caveat to that. It doesn't just, it's technical training, because your technique, if it starts to change and you're trying to rally 50 shots past the service line, you will be exposed and you'll fail. So it's great technical training because it's repeatability of your technique over a long period of time, over a lot of volume. It's also great mentally. To stay focused for 50 shots is not easy, and it finds people out. It finds the wheat from the chaff. And that's a really important talent identification. Bob Brett used to believe in that a lot. Like, we're going to do 100 shots near the sideline and we're not going to finish the drill until everyone does it. Now, it's a bit old school, but it does find out the people that want to do it. It does find out the people that love the challenge of a simple task and doing it over and over again. And there's something quite special about that, I think. Thirdly, physically, to rally all the time, good tempo, past the service line, that's physically tough on the body. And then, of course, tactically, it's great because it means you can repeat the pattern that you're talking about, Avoye, about consistently hitting deep down the middle or cross-court forehands or whatever it may be. So I think those high rally threshold drills are essential in the warm-up, in the tennis warm-up. If you're doing a 2-hour squad and it's half an hour of hitting up and down, timing, feeling the ball, moving, warming up, just making no mistakes, lots of volume, that's when it's really good. I remember being at the ITF Worldwide Coaches Conference one year, and there was a panel, and it was really important panel discussion. They were talking about the similarities and differences across federations around the world. No one could agree on mini tennis. Some countries do it, some kids don't. Some kids use sponge ball, some kids use red ball. Some kids don't do orange, don't do the sidelines, the Austrians green. I mean, 10 and under tennis, everyone's doing it different. Professional tennis, Davis Cup, Fed Cup, what they do for their players, funding, couldn't agree. No one could agree. But the one thing that everyone agreed on was that in the teenage years, you need to hit millions of balls. There's no shortcut to that in player development. And therefore, the question is, well, but how do you hit those millions of balls? And is it through Craig O'Shaughnessy, wonderful shots, always game-based, always serve return? Or a lot of the countries still believe in developing the mindset of, I will out-rally my opponent. I won't miss. I'll be solid on my forehand, solid on my backhand. I'll move the ball around whilst not missing. That's still a belief that I think is incredibly valuable. Of course, if they do that for the 2 hours, they won't develop the freedom to attack, defend, drop shot, slice approach. So you can't do that drill every day, all day. It's got to be used for a short period of time to develop those skills, whilst you then develop the attacking skills, developing the return of serve skills, developing the approach skills. So that's, I guess, my summary of your question, to get the best of both worlds. Is that okay?
Yeah, and of course, as a short reaction to that, we need to be goal-oriented. And the way you explain it, it's excellent, because it has a direction, like, where do I want to go? But again, using one of the statements by Einstein, he gave the definition for insanity is keep doing the same and expecting different results.
Yeah.
So within the principle of consistency, I would always urge players to add some quality to the shot. Because yes, even with my left hand, I can, and I'm a right-handed player, but with my left hand, I can hit hundreds of one-handed backhands with my untrained backhand left-handed, but there's no quality whatsoever. So repeating the same thing without adding quality to it, that I don't believe in, not at all.
Yeah, in skill acquisition, they call it repetition without repetition. You need repetition, but it doesn't always have to be repetition.
And Piotr mentioned, of course, the Professor Schulhorn, who we had in the conference, and he uses that a lot within the element of differential learning, which is so interesting to see how he triggers the adaptation and, as I mentioned before, the differentiation in your body movements and how to be sure about being safe in what you're doing without limiting them in how to do it. So we teach the skill and we teach the repetition of the skill with quality and move borders. And then the accelerated path for the talented player will certainly be there. I'm sure of that.
Anyway, I think Piotr can also add something to that, because I know that he did some articles on this some time ago. But I just want to finish from my side this topic with saying we found actually the next topic for our conversation. It's actually skill acquisition. Thoughts from you, Piotr, in order to finish this, I would say, very interesting conversation that we had today. Almost 1.5 hours we are talking to each other. We will kill our audience.
Yeah, you know, I like to meet you guys again. So I think I can conclude it very shortly that there is, we call it in Polish, a golden middle, that, okay, repetition, yes, differentiation, yes, sometimes even playing cross court for 50 times if there is a goal for it. Yeah. So in the end, altogether, everybody is right and all methods are okay if they support the goal.
Yeah.
If we know what we are doing, it's not that, oh, it's a nice exercise, so let's do it because it's beautiful. What's your goal? And I think this is one of the skills of great coaches. They have goals and they found the tools to make these goals true.
Brilliant. Thank you. That's a great way to end, I think. Piotr, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, look, from my perspective, I've really enjoyed this topic. It's one that's always thought-provoking to the highest degree, because, you know, what is talent? What should we do with it? How is it best developed? Should we be careful with our labeling? Yes. You know, talent means many things. We've exposed that today, that it could be absolutely wide in our broadening of our understanding of what talent actually is, and we have to be so careful with how we communicate that with our players and what we expect of our players. So thank you to everyone for joining today. Does anyone else want to just finish on some last statements and say anything?
Frank?
Well, I'm happy with the way we talked through all the different elements of the topic of today. So thank you for your contributions, and let's continue next time with skill accusation and make sure that we have another interesting talk then.
Thanks, mate. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you very much.